Hi, welcome. This is Metamorphosis Mentors. I am your host, Liz Michael. Today we have with us Michele Vrabel, who has her own podcast, Old School, and her new book coming out called Butterfly Stitches. We're going to talk about her book and her life's journey and joy and healing and how God has shown up. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Michele.
Hi, sweetie.
So good to have you here today. It's just such a privilege, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to share with us today because I know you have lots of stuff to come from.
Yeah, I've been told I have a few words. In fact, my last name is Vrabel, but people throughout my life have mispronounced it verbal, which I don't think is an accident.
Yeah.
And
That
my
is very
ex-husband, when I
funny.
had my daughter and we were trying to come up with names, he wanted Gabriella. And I thought, oh, that's so pretty. And I thought, nickname Gabby for somebody who's been called verbal. No.
Yeah. Probably not a good idea. Oh,
We're
that's
not
so
going to go
funny.
there.
Yes.
And the poor little thing, she's not.
Yes.
She's not a really Gabby. She's not like her mom.
That's great. Well, so tell about your podcast. Let's start there.
Okay.
Tell how you got started, what made you start, and the whole calling that you've had of how to serve people by having a podcast and soon to be a book.
Well, it actually came from the book. Okay. So I don't know how many years ago. It's a long time now. The Lord asked me to write this book. And initially I thought it was just for me. And then he has led me to finding mentors and finding people and showing me that this is now not going to be just for me. So I got some writing coaches, Bob Goff and Kimberly Stewart, absolutely some of the most phenomenal humans God put on the earth, love them to death. And Bob, I put in the book, in the acknowledgments, it's so funny, that every time he and I had our phone conversations, he would say, now you need to, and it would be gripped with fear because I'm like, now what do I need to?
He's pushing buttons again, yes.
So he told me that having a podcast would be a great way to further the story of my book. To not make it isolated to a book, but make it isolated to my story and what I was trying to put out there. My writing, my story, what I needed to tell, and my relationship with Jesus, of course. So I had started a YouTube channel with my daughter, already called Old School. So I was having fun with that, but it had not occurred to me that could be a furthering of my book or what have you. So anyway, he tells me to do this, and I go, okay. And so he, on the same phone call, says, okay, I'll be your first guest. What day do you want to record? And I'm like, I don't have anything. What do I need? He goes, you need a laptop and Zoom. He goes, what day works for you? And I was like, and he made me pick. And he said, if a guest tells you that they will be on your show, don't say, all right, I'll send you over and pick a day. He goes, you say, does Tuesday work for you? He goes, because he goes, not because they want to, not because they're being mean, but it's just life gets a hold of everybody and they'll not end up showing up. So anyway, he said he'd be my first guest. I had a laptop. I got Zoom Pro so that I wasn't limited by time because apparently regular Zoom does. And we did the recording, and this was in May of 2023. And my first episode of Old School with Michele Vrabel dropped on June 7th, the first Wednesday in June. And he was so funny. He was like, this is all you need. And then you just go over here and put it on this platform. Well, it was a platform that was allowing him to go on because he's him. So then he gives me the email of his assistant, who is absolutely adorable. And she's like, of course, Bob said all you need is a laptop and Zoom because they do everything else,
That's right. That's all he needs.
So she told me, she's like, this is when normally you would release a podcast. So she gave me all these great details, like audio you release in the middle of the week, video people will watch YouTube and the videos more on the weekend. So she was just awesome about how to release it. She was talking about how when she listens to podcasts, she doesn't necessarily sit there and go, oh, I want to hear from the Kardashians or Joe Rogan, that hearing from men and women who are just talking about their stories, real life
Yes.
situations and stuff was more exciting. And I don't know how far my reach has gone. I do look at analytics and stuff, but for the most part, it parallels my story with my Jesus. I talk about trying to get to or into healing in the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, because we're never there. I mean, when we're healed 100%, we're going to be seeing the face of Jesus. So it's a process. So healing, and it's my story, his story, and our story that I try to represent in every one of the episodes. That's what I try to do. So I have had phenomenal people tell me that reach out and want to be on the podcast. And I have so many episodes recorded that I don't need to record another one until 2025, to be perfectly honest, but they're coming in. And so it has just been a journey and something that's been wonderful. And Bob didn't stop there. The next you need to was speaking, and you and I can get into that.
Yes, we can. Yes, it's just been such a journey for you, and a journey of faith, a journey of trust,
Yes.
a journey of nerves and anxieties and all of those things. But let's talk a little bit more about you.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about your story and your background. What led you to this?
Well, I turned 62 recently, as we record this, and that's a lot of life of listening sometimes and not listening sometimes. But my book, Butterfly Stitches, talks about my story. The Lord asked me to talk about that. And when we all walk through life with trials, with tribulations, with, valleys and mountaintops. And some of my valleys started very early on. One of my worst beatings was when I was 2 years old. And I talk about in my book, it's called Butterfly Stitches, The Metamorphosis of Healing. And what that means is that I'm talking to everybody about how the Lord showed me where the moment of healing begins. And it actually begins physically, even the way we were created, at the moment of the wound, at the very moment. And I was talking to somebody the other day that, if they were to reach over and punch me, the physical immediate reaction would be ow, and my body would send the troops over to start the healing. It's going to bruise, it's going to hurt, but the healing begins. Mentally, I'm going to be like, what the heck? I thought you were my friend.
Right.
Emotionally, I'd be heartbroken. Why did you need to hit me? And then spiritually, I'm like, okay, your moral compass, why did you strike a woman if it was a guy, or whatever. But you go through all of these and you need to address that healing, and where does that come from? Well, when I was 2 years old and that beating had taken place and my father threw me on my bed and walked out of the room, I literally, and it's now in the looking back that I see it, but I literally thought at that moment that he was bad for what had happened. It wasn't something I did, or it wasn't something that God or somebody allowed. It was in my 2-year-old mind, I was able to reconcile that, that wasn't a good thing. He's my daddy. He's not supposed to do that to me, but not that it was how it's supposed to be, and that is how I believe that even though we receive the Holy Spirit 100% when we get saved, that I don't believe he's not with us from birth or from before we're knit together in our mother's womb. So my childhood and on up through my divorce, which will be in the sequel, contained a lot of abuse, and it contained a lot of needing to listen to how I was created to start that healing and start those mechanisms so that I could survive. And I went through periods of time as I got older where a lot of the stuff that happened to me was at my own hands. It was at my own doing. I wanted to make some choices that I thought was putting me in control, which I hear God laughing every time I say that out loud, us in control of anything. And so I've always referred to it as my story, his story, our story. And he, in order to work any of this together for good, that I might be able to show others that in the telling, and that's where it's at, in the telling. The sequel is called Out Loud, the sound of healing, and how in the telling of our story is where we can see how the healing started and how we can grab a hold of that and continue that journey.
I think that's very insightful. And I love the fact that God uses us where we are. He doesn't change us and then use us. He uses us where we are and in the circumstances where we are as well. And how you approached it from the 4 different angles and discovered that the healing was taking place. Even at 2 years old, you had that sense about you that was so inbred in your heart.
It's created in us.
Exactly. But yet you knew that even at such a young age. I think that's very just warming to my soul to hear, because it gives me hope for so many things that you think are lost otherwise. And they're not necessarily, they're just being jumbled around many times, and they're still there.
Well, and I think a lot of times when people have been through this kind of stuff, and I'm 62, like I said, so back in the 60s, there weren't the organizations or the mechanisms or the stuff I literally had no one physically look at me or emotionally look at me. Zero. The first counselor I ever had was during my marriage when we needed some help. My comforter and my counselor, I say, was the Holy Spirit that entire time. You know, we talk about like intuition, or we talk about hearing that still small voice, if you will. I do believe, and how much of it I was actually aware of when I was that young, I do believe I was aware at multiple times. But there were also times when it's only in the looking back, in when I sat down and started writing my story as he asked me to, that I'm like, oh my gosh, every bit of it is a thread working its way through. And that's why I titled the book, and this is totally a vision from the Lord, the title, the cover, everything. And I've had people balk at how it all is coming together, but the title is Butterfly Stitches. And for a lot of people, they may not know what that is, but that's an actual bandage, if you will. And it's used on wounds that aren't deep enough for actual stitches, but are deep. And it can sometimes make them take a little longer to heal as well. And that is exactly how I feel about those kind of wounds. We can't find, there is not, even in Jesus, to be perfect. I mean, some people may believe it's true, but I don't believe there's I dream a genie, immediate healing of anything we go through, because there's a learning. So I consider healing a process, not a one-time transaction, just like forgiveness. Forgiveness is something we have to get up and remember that we're going to, we've accepted that forgiveness and we're doling that out. We're showing that grace and that mercy. So I honestly believe that the way Jesus works out that healing is a process. It's so that you understand, and so that the next time you're going to walk through something, because there's not a question about there's going to be a next time.
That's correct.
Now you have the tools. Now you have what you need to be able to see how you can survive that, because that's how this world operates. It's not something. I had this conversation yesterday with somebody that was talking about how a person didn't believe in God. They expressed to her they don't believe in God. You're right. You can sit in that. But then they wanted to believe in God when something bad happened to them.
Exactly.
Now
Yes.
he exists and he caused this. Well, it doesn't work both ways on that.
Exactly. Yes.
No, either you trust that even when the good things were happening to you, it was because God gifted you by grace. He created you with those gifts and talents, and that's how you got there.
Yes.
Not, I did this all myself, and now you cost me X, Y, or Z. So it's very interesting, and I think that my book is going to have, and my story is going to be a little controversial and provocative, and I think that's a good thing. When Jesus, when he was here, he sat with the sinners and the tax collectors. He turned over some tables. He was a little provocative, and it is not a devotional. It is not a Bible study. It is a memoir. It's a teaching memoir, and talking about my story and how my God worked it together for good.
I had the pleasure of being a beta tester for your book. Honored to do so, and it was really riveting. I mean, it just sucked me in and did not take me any time at all to read it, because I just needed to keep going, just needed to know more, know more, know more, know more. It caused me to look at the people in the Bible and their lives differently because of your book. And that is
A side benefit I didn't
right,
even know.
exactly.
Right?
Because then I started looking back and the different characters, the different people in the Bible, and the stories about them. That's what the whole Bible is, the stories about people, right? And the journeys of their lives. It really caused me to step back and look more at the healing process that they went through and the different steps along the way rather than just from here to there. So
Awesome.
it was really interesting how that changed my thinking on healing and life and journeys that we go through. So I appreciate that.
That is awesome. I went to a conference not that long ago, and Jen Wilkin, who's a Christian author, was speaking at it, and she told a story about Rahab, which I thought was fascinating. She even kind of giggled and said, "This isn't often preached from the pulpit because the women of the Bible aren't normally the subject, and especially one who was, decidedly a prostitute, but her journey." And what was fascinating is she talked about how the Israelites, if they hadn't been disobedient, they wouldn't have stayed in the wilderness longer, and they would have made it to Jericho sooner. And she may not have ever had to be pressed into some kind of servitude, and she would have had her deliverance on time. Okay, so I felt like a girlfriend of mine and I call it, I got a slap in the face, because I was disobedient when the Lord asked me to originally write the story. I drug my feet. I mean, I started writing some stuff down, but I didn't really do what I was supposed to do. And not that I think should deserve some story in the Bible or something, but my story with God is my story with God. And could my disobedience delay somebody else's deliverance? You're telling me now that it's given you a whole different picture in healing. That's my prayer for my story. I don't think I'm going to sell a bunch of books and make a bunch of money. That isn't the deal at all. I want it to do what the Lord is telling me it's going to do. And this is awesome. I absolutely love that.
Yes. It's just exciting to me to think back. Well, first off, let me restart that because I think in our society today, I think we think that life should be easy. Right?
Absolutely.
It's
Or we definitely don't like it when it's hard.
That's right, exactly. And we act shocked when life becomes hard. It's like, what the heck? It's like, no, that's not it. Life is hard. There are easy spots, or seemingly easy spots that come along and that we're shored up along the way. But we should expect life to be hard. That should not be a shock or surprise to us. It's going to be hard for all of us. But the secret sauce is finding that joy in healing and the experience of life, and to be able to express that and to live into that and make every day full of joy and healing, because that's when the rubber hits the road. And that's where we find Jesus right there, lifting us, holding us close to him, and carrying us along the path. That's where we're closest, is when we are down on our knees and getting dirty in our sin. And so I just love that I'm looking at healing differently because of how the Bible takes us through these journeys of life. And like you said, it's full of people who are less than and who've struggled in ways that maybe you and I will never and couldn't even imagine. But he uses them and he helps to heal them and strengthen them and empower them, even though they're sinners, and brings them joy.
Well, and I think too, like as you're saying this, that the world at large, the reason they struggle, I think, with a lot of that, and there's always the churchy things to say, like free will and all, and those things are very real. But saying that to somebody who's walked through some genuine hurt is difficult. So I think helping them understand where we do receive that healing and how we can walk that process, as opposed to, I remember one time being in a ladies' Bible study and somebody saying to me that Jesus was holding my hand the whole time I was being sexually abused. Now, was Jesus unaware this was happening to me? This is the free will of the individual who did it. I never once blamed God, but was that the thing to say to a young lady in her 20s who had just shared something so raw with you? No. I mean, it broke his heart, I guarantee you. But helping people understand, both in the Christian community and outside of it, how we can be, as Christians, so faith-filled and so hopeful, and understand how our Jesus is helping us in this world to have that faith and have that joy. It's a different story, and it's so, I love you sharing it this way with me, because you do a thing called a book proposal if you try to get an agent or a traditional publisher, and I'm going self-publishing. But one of the things you have to do is put this little hook at the front, right? And why is my story of abuse any different? And you just kind of shaped a beautiful couple of sentences for me, is that, and I've been walking in that too, but just understanding why the healing I'm talking about is different than people feeling like there has to be this one-time transaction. Like they're older, they express that they've been through abuse, they find salvation in Jesus, and they think it should all just be wiped away and they should be one-time healed. And I think that can be misleading, because I don't even think Jesus promises that. We have to work on, making sure that we are letting go of that we are forgiving, not because the abusers deserve it per se, but because we can't carry that stuff in life. You can't be truly healed, in my opinion, if you're hanging on to all that stuff. For sure.
And we're forgiven. That's how we can forgive. That's the only way we can forgive.
Absolutely.
It's, as you said, it's not because they deserve it. They don't. Neither do we.
No. And it's not like God said, all that crap you did is okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that you did all that. No, I'm extending that forgiveness to you. But it doesn't mean I'm excusing your behavior.
Exactly.
It means I'm forgiving you. I'm your redeemer.
Yes.
And the same with our abusers. We're not, it's not we're letting them off the hook for what they did. But the interesting part, and I've had people ask me this, if I forgave my father, and I haven't seen him since I was 14, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He lives in Florida now. He's still alive. And he wouldn't care one way or the other if I forgave him or not. I need it.
Yes.
I need it.
Absolutely.
How bitter and miserable of a life would I have had? And could I have continued that generational sin with my own daughter if I hadn't walked this process?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it just restricts you. It doesn't hurt that person who caused the sin. It doesn't hurt them at all if you forgive them or not. Like
Couldn't
you said,
care less.
No. And they probably, many times, they don't even have a clue what impact it had on you, or sometimes even that they sinned against you. They may not even recognize it as that, or see it as something of that nature that they need to be forgiven for.
Right.
So it is
Well,
just...
he clearly hasn't reached out for it. So.
Right. So it's just imprisoning you.
Yep.
It's not doing anything
Absolutely.
to the person who caused the pain.